Hey guys, Andy Yain, spoken label. My mate Peter Roe. Now we're going to still got plenty more to go with Peter here. So if people are wondering, yeah, this is going to be a lengthy podcast, but hey ho, right? So, okay, now Peter's other two books he sent to me, unless he's got some more I don't know about. I don't know where this podcast is going. Nothing would surprise me there.
I've
So,
got three more in the pipeline,
we'll come on to
but
that
they're
shortly
not
then.
out yet.
We'll come on
So,
to that shortly then. Now,
mm.
obviously, was Odin and the Mead of Poetry and Love Hurts. Now, which one do you want to talk about first, Peter? I'll let you decide then.
uh, let's do Odin and the Mead of Poetry. Okay.
Okay, yeah. Now, I love the story of Odin and stuff. So where did the idea for this book come from?
Well, originally, okay, as a kid, all right, I was in junior school. I was way ahead of my peers who were reading Peter and Jane and things like that. I was
Hmm.
already, um, you know, 7 or 8. I had a reading age of 16. Uh, and probably because of the autism and things like that, I was just hyper focused on books. I basically consumed most of the library van that used to come to our house. We lived in the countryside, and there was not much left on the library van. And then I started on the library in the local town. I used to have to walk 2 miles to town to get to the library. And but yeah, I just would read everything, adventure novels and uh, um, science fiction and mythology and almost anything like that. So I got very into myth and legend and stuff like that. And I put that down to a junior school teacher who recognized that I was way ahead of the others. And she used to sit me out in the area just outside the classroom and give me Nature magazine to read. And she would also bring in books from home. And she brought in a book called about Siegfried, and that's Nordic legends, of course, and Beowulf she brought in as well. But the Siegfried I remember very vividly because it was all sort of it was illustrated as well, and I got all these dragons and things inside my head, and it it was just amazing. And then got onto Greek legends and Nordic legends as well. And yeah, so I was sort of reading through all of these, like uh, the Prose Edda by Snorri Snorrason, and most people wouldn't have even thought about that sort of thing, and Gawain and the Green Knight and everything like that. I was reading lots of stuff, and the Knights of the Round Table and things like that. So that's where that interest of it of the legends come from, and I've always had this kinship with Thor and Odin and those sort of tales. And I was really happy when my genes test came back and said I'm about 19% uh, Viking or something, So I felt justified finally. And the uh, the story behind the Odin is I wrote as a writing exercise from the writers group I was in. I had to write a story from the point of view of a plant, and I thought, oh, I don't want to write a story from the point of view of a plant. And I thought, hmm, how about Yggdrasil, the world tree? And so the narrator for Odin the Mead of Poetry is Yggdrasil, the world tree. And it's all about Odin getting impaled upon the world tree with the spear Gungnir, and then his adventures. And it's all about Odin and the Mead of Poetry. Of course, it is. How do poets get their, um, how do they get their way with words? What makes them a wordsmith? And why are there bad poets?
Ooh.
All of those questions are answered in the book. And I like to think that my twist on the legend is totally unique. As I say, it started out initially as a writing exercise, a short story, and the first chapter was something that I read out at an event that I went to. I was going to an event in Lyme Regis at the time. Oh God, I can't remember what it's called now. But anyway, I read this story out, and it was in support of a charity that some friends of mine run called the Word Forest Organization, and they were basically planting trees. They plant trees, or they were planting trees for every competition entry they had when they had a company called Magic Oxygen at the time. But their charity ended up taking over more and more time. So they closed Magic Oxygen at some stage, but they started this charity called the Word Forest Organization. And what they're doing is planting trees in Kenya and building schools and stuff like that. And they're having an amazing effect. But I read this read this short story rather, at their event because it was about trees and and everything else. So that was the first chapter. And there's a friend of mine called Izzy Robertson, and she's actually one of my co-directors in Jawbone now. She's such a big fan of Jawbone. She said, "I want to be involved," and so she is. She's one of our co-directors. But she was the impetus behind me writing a second chapter. She says, "I want to know how Odin gets off that spear." So what followed then was I would write a chapter, and then I'd ring Izzy up, and she'd sit on the stairs, and I would read the poem to her over the telephone. Not the poem, the chapter to her over the telephone. And so this went on, and there are, I think, 12 chapters or 13 chapters. It's a novelette. It's about 12,500 words. And originally, I decided that I would write it for the BBC short story competition, and that's what I did. I wrote it, and it had to be 12,000 words. No, it had to be 10,000 words for the BBC short story competition. So I ended up editing it down and gone through all of that process and found that I couldn't publish it. I couldn't print it. Because I couldn't send it into the BBC because you had to be a published author. Now, I was a published author because I'd already got Technology Bites Back, but Technology Bites Back, because I hadn't published any, they hadn't, at that point, Wessex Media hadn't published anybody else. I was technically self-published, and they didn't accept applications from self-published authors, and that was deep in the fine print. And I thought, bugger. So they actually missed out that year. And I thought, well, by the time the next year, I thought, well, I'll just sit on it for now. And then the next year came around. I thought we published then by that time two other people. So technically then Wessex Media, as it was before anything else, but we published then 3 people. So then we were a bona fide publisher at that point. So the following year I could have entered. However, they changed the rules and said the short story needed to be 8,000 words.
Oh, for goodness sake.
I can't do that. And in fact, I already felt the last chapter was a bit pushed, because I'd had to cut it down. So I thought, oh, bugger it, I'm going to put these words back. So I went back and I rewrote the last couple of chapters, and so yeah, that's how Odin and the Mead of Poetry came around. And I was going to publish it. It was going to get published. I'd got somebody who was going to publish it. Another small press, and they were going to publish Love Hurts and Odin and the Mead of Poetry, but they had something happen, which meant that those 2 documents, and any other publishing, they basically stopped publishing. So, which was unfortunate. It meant that I'd spent 12, nearly 18 months with these, waiting to go to publication, and then, for whatever reason, it didn't happen. And so I said, right, well, we'll just publish them then. And I just brought them back into the fold and brought them out. And they both came out on Valentine's Day, or for Valentine's Day, because yeah, Love Hurts is a story about dating online during COVID and finding a new love. Um, you know, following the debacle of being in love with your barista. So
Yeah, a worthy sequel, definitely with that one. So
that's right. So
definitely that. Now, obviously, with that book, there's a couple of pieces I want to ask you about here. Now, obviously, the first one I want to touch on is about your love of mermaids. Now, and I had to double check the meaning of this word. Are mermaids, and I can't even pronounce it, is it
our mermaid's pescatarian
pescatarian? I know what a pescatarian is now because the person does not eat meat, but
and
does
only
eat
eats fish.
fish. Yeah, I know someone's like that, but I couldn't, that's person been dyspraxic there. If you, my words like that will throw me. So, where did this piece come from then? 'Cause I love the myth of mermaids.
Well, during COVID, of course, we were dating. We were told to date online, So and that's what we did. In between COVID, I met up with somebody who uh, was nice, and she had golden hair and tight permed hair. She looked like a mermaid, and she spent a lot of time on the water, either paddle boarding or wild swimming. But in the end, she seemed to spend more time doing that than dating me. So yeah, so that's really what the poem's about. So it's about uh, dating a mermaid and then chucking her back in the water. So
Yeah, letting her stay free, then basically, don't you? So, yeah, no, I get you
yeah,
completely with that.
so
Brilliant.
so that's the sort of origin of that. And then there's obviously a number of other poems in there that relate to dating different people during COVID and the adventures that ensued. Some of them are to do with a dating profile, because I suddenly thought if a wordsmith can't write a dating profile, then there's something wrong. And yeah, so my dating profiles ended up being poetry. Um,
I'd have been surprised if they hadn't been Peter there. So, where did the other one I asked you about leaving the centre of Britain come from then? Because
well,
wasn't this a poem you want to show me the formatting of this one? You were talking about poems were changing, weren't you?
oh yes, yeah, yeah. Well, um, yeah. What I'll do is I'll share a screen with you on
Yeah.
that.
Now,
I'll,
obviously, people are wondering on the video side, stay hang on the video because share screens now. But on the audio side, bear with us because we'll talk you through this, Peter, won't we?
right, okay. Where's it gone? I can't
It's
even
not,
see it myself.
yeah, it's on the screen there. I can see it.
You can see it, right? It's buried somewhere for me. So underneath all my other windows, right? Let me just pull that up. Leaving the centre of Britain. There we go. Got it. All right, it's over there. Okay, so leaving the centre of Britain. That's my brother and my mother, in fact, live in a place called uh, Holtwhistle, which is in Northumberland, and it's supposedly the geographic centre of Britain. And I took my new love, or then new love. We'd been going out, I think, about 9 months at the time. I took her up to meet my mother, and we stayed there over uh, New Year. And we left early in the morning on New Year's Day. And I said, "Oh, I'll take you to see this stone circle called Long Meg and her Daughters, which is in Cumbria, not far from the M6. But you have to go down some little lanes and it's everything else." But I said, "Oh, we'll try and get there for dawn. We'll make an early start. We'll get there for dawn around this stone circle." And yeah, so that's really what the poem is about. It's about the journey back, and yeah, we came off the road at one point because we hit some black ice, and yeah, it's just all about that meeting. I mean, I can read this poem to you now if you want.
No, save it for the third part, to or maybe TikTok, because
Okay.
I want,
What you wanted to know was about the layout, didn't you?
yes, I didn't this because you were telling me obviously before you're going to be, but this touched on what's coming next anyway, so we'll jump onto that really. It's like you talk about reformatting some of your poems, weren't you? And
That's right. Yeah.
you want to show people here, this is how like a good example of how you perform poetry as well, wasn't it? Or is this a good example of that?
Well, over the last few years, because I've been printing poetry or publishing poetry, I always felt that there's a better way of laying out poetry, and especially when it's performance poetry. Uh, and I've sort of invented this methodology for laying out poetry on the page. And in theory, you should be able to read that poem, giving it the right accent and the right breaks, the right pauses, so that when you read it, you can follow it and it'll come out the way I intend it to. All right. So, and this method I've invented is called gravitas verbatim. Gravitas is weight, and verbatim as it's spoken. All right. So it's the weight of the words. All right. And it's a performance poetry methodology that reflects the rhythm and the pacing and the gravity of spoken word poetry directly on the page. And it minimizes traditional punctuation in favor of white spaces, tabs, and ellipses to convey the weight of the pauses and the flow of the delivery. And the layout itself becomes a guide for the reader or the performer. And it means then that the poem, its spoken delivery, is mirrored in its written form. And it allows the space around the words to carry as much meaning as the words themselves, and reinforcing how the performance shapes the poetic impact. And I'm lucky enough to have been invited to deliver this method at a thing called the Scripts the Thing in Dorset in May. And they're all about scripts and performance. And if you think about what performance poetry is, it's also a script, and it's about delivery as well. So I'm hoping that you'll actually have a good reception, and I've got some good examples of it which I can do. So my methodology, gravitas verbatim, basically transforms the page into a performance space or a script, and it means that anyone reading the poem can probably quite quickly replicate the original delivery, understand the pacing, and then the emphasis, and therefore the gravity intended by the poet. So there you go. That's what it's all about. Gravitas verbatim. And yeah, I'll be able to show you that when we read through that poem later
Yes,
on.
please. Yes, please. Definitely on with that. Now, obviously, to wrap up part two, then, to be the word, it feels weird saying that. What do you have planned next then for your creativity? You said already to me, you've got not one, not two, you've got three collections penned or go. Is there any hints
Well,
you want to give about them?
well, there's three collections. I did actually write a collection called It's About Time, and I submitted that to the Hedgehog Full Fat Poetry Collection, and I was runner up. Uh, so it's like getting an Oscar nomination but not getting the prize. So I didn't actually get published by Hedgehog for that, but the collection I submitted has changed since. I've actually it's a lot of it is about my father and about fatherhood generally, because being a father myself and all the rest of it, and it's about living. Also, it's about living in the moment. So it's about uh, moments of divine beauty. It's about living in a moment. It's about fatherhood and my relationship with my father, because it was not always easy. My mother said we were too much alike, and so we were often like this at loggerheads, and yeah. So it's in a way it's about me coming to terms with my father. It's about me coming to terms with being a father and stuff like that. So which hasn't been an easy journey either, for various reasons.
Course, yeah, of
So,
course. And that's just one of them. And you've got another two in
yeah,
mind
so
as well, haven't
that
you?
that one is one that is basically ready, but I haven't got somewhere for it to go to yet. Um, the other two are both practically finished and have both been submitted to the Rattle Poetry Prize this year. So
Ooh,
I'm hoping, that something might come of those. I'll know by April whether uh, whether that'll go anywhere. If not, then I will probably self-publish those or publish them in a different way, or I might even submit them to some of the bigger publishers and see if I can get somebody else to take me on board. Those two, what are they called? One is called Smombies.
Oh, that's a good title.
That, yeah,
It's a good
it's
title.
Smartphone Zombies
Yeah.
is what that one's about. And it's all about technology. It's anti-technology, it's anti-corporation, it's anti-dopamine, all of those sort of things. And some of the poems that are in that were from my first collection, Technology Bites Back. So I think there's maybe half a dozen poems that have been recycled into that. But also, I've obviously written a lot more about technology and stuff like that since, and corporations. So that's all about technology and corporations and capitalism and stuff like that. So, and I'm feeling pretty proud of that collection. And if that doesn't set them on fire in America at the moment, then I don't know what will. I have done some on open mic, online open mics at American events, and they went down really well.
Oh,
So
brilliant.
I think I might have hit the right note. It might just be the right time for that collection.
Brilliant.
The other one is called The If of the Id, and that's sort of more about my inner journey. It's about finding out who I am and, you know, how things seem. You know, I'm very much into the Jungian worldview, you know, and the global consciousness and things like that. So there's a lot of philosophy in it. There's a lot of looking at the self. There's a lot about the inner critic. There's a lot about being autistic and how we deal with the world and things like that. So I like to think that that's another good collection. Well, I feel it is a good collection, but we'll see. So
I trust you.
I've got two chances, and
Fingers crossed for you, one of them, if not both,
yeah.
mate,
So
definitely.
I'm hoping that one or the other will find its way favor with a judge. You know,
Brilliant.
what
Now,
happens.
obviously, now I've talked about yourself coming up. Is there anything you want to announce what's coming up with Jawbone?
Well, Jawbone, obviously the Jawbone Journal we've got coming up in we'll be opening up for submissions in April for that. And if anyone wants to sign up for our email list, you can go onto our website, and that's www.jawbonecollective.org.uk, and you can find our mailing list there, and anyone who's on the mailing list will get all the information about the Jawbone Journal. And we will obviously be putting things out on social media about the Jawbone Journal and where we're going with that. And yeah, that's probably, for me, that's one of the most exciting things. There are other things that are going on which we can't necessarily talk about at the moment. We're working with a couple of arts organizations to do stuff, and those, again, we will announce those as they come up. Yes. Oh yes, that's my partner Megan over there in the background, and
Hi,
she
Megan.
says the rug. Oh, you're going to get it for me. Okay.
Now
Uh,
we're back on video exclusive now. I don't know what me we're getting bought over here now, so bear with us a second. But I like this. You keep me. What's good at podcasts like this, Pete? You keep me on my toes. I don't know what's going on here.
well, interestingly enough, about a couple of years ago, I got involved because my father being a clockmaker, as part of my It's About Time collection. I started writing poetry about clocks and time and all things like that. And we were on holiday in Spain a couple of years ago, and we were at the Alhambra Palace, and I saw a little thing about a clock. It said Ibn al-Jatib in such and such a year spoke about a clock where, at the ringing of a a piece of paper with poetry on would be passed to the timekeeper, who would then read out this poem to mark the time of the day. All right, on the hour, every hour. So you get a different poem every hour of the day. And I thought that was the only reference I could find to it, was on this little tiny thing in the Alhambra, in the Alhambra Palace at the museum. And I thought, wow, that's interesting. So me being an autist, I went deep diving then when I came back into Islamic water clocks. And I found out a lot about Islamic water clocks, and I wrote some poems about Islamic water clocks. And because of that, I got very into Islamic culture and science and things like that. And they were having a cultural revolution and a renaissance between about 900 AD right up until about 1400 AD. And a lot of their inventions and a lot of their technologies were taken by scribes and things like that to Italy. And they were what fueled the actual Italian Renaissance, and and then this whole cultural revolution that we had in Europe. And one of the things that I saw last year often come up on my feed was something about an Islamic 17th century carpet called the dragon carpet. And it was apparently a carpet that was the victim of a firebomb at the end of Second World War in a museum in Berlin. And it was very badly burnt. There was whole sections of it burnt away. And they have replaced the bits that were burnt away with just some very fine white, or neutral background. And what's happened is, if you imagine, like when you do a paper doily, you cut out bits and things like that around, and you get whole sections missing. It's the same with this carpet, because it was rolled up. So where the fire damage has been on one point, in a number of points, it's actually burnt right through. So you've got this repeating pattern of burns or missing pieces all the way down this thing. And it's now on the wall in the Pergamon Museum in Berlin. What they did that was in 2004, they restored this. What they've done is they've made a doppelganger of this carpet. They've copied this carpet and recreated it as a mirror image. And then they've cut this mirror image carpet up into 100 pieces, which they are sending around the world to various creatives and asking them to respond to it in whichever way they want. And so what I actually have now is I was invited to be part of this project, and I now have a piece of this dragon carpet in front of me. Wow. And you can see the white bits on this are bits where it was burnt away. This is one of the more intact pieces. So so I'm quite chuffed that I got a piece with lots of color in it and everything else. So, and I've written this poem, of course. After I heard that I'd been accepted onto this project, I said, well, I was so excited that I wrote a poem that night. And so I've written a poem about this carpet called Carpet Divining. And and it is quite inspiring. But what I am now going to do is go around. I'm going around to various places, workshops and things like that, to actually show this carpet and get people to respond to it. Because what we're ultimately going to do is work towards an anthology of work that is created from seeing this carpet or touching this carpet or smelling this carpet. And I've already taken it out to Word Forest in Sidmouth, which is a poetry event that we go to every month. And I didn't realize that it actually smells of India. The people that had actually had it before us, so you become the owner of this carpet. They call you the owner, and this is fragment number 28. And so you become the owner of this carpet for a little while. So I'm going to have it for like 9 months, and I get to take it to workshops and things like that, get people to respond to it. We took it into this um, open mic night, and I introduced the carpet. I did my poem about the carpet, and I said that yeah, the previous owner had actually been making in it had been in India, and they'd been making meals and serving them up on this carpet in the center of a table, and then taking photographs of all of these meals. And the lady who runs the poetry event, she came up to this carpet and she bent over it, and it looked like she was praying over this carpet. But actually, what she was doing, she says, it smells of India. And indeed it does. It smells of spices and things. It
Oh,
smells exotic.
that's
And I never thought about that as a, I mean, I've been touching it and feeling it, but I hadn't smelt it up until then. And then I took a deep inhale of this thing, and indeed it did smell of spices and of India. So we've got the touch, we've got the visual part of it, and we've got the smell of it. So and the whole project is about cross-cultural collaboration, because in this day and age we need more cross-cultural collaboration. We need connections, and actually just even writing the poem, I'm already connected now to those people that had the the piece previously, because you've got the smells of this thing, but we're also connected to the people who've tied the knots and made this carpet, the new version of it, the people, the carpet weavers in India that made this carpet, the doppelganger carpet. But there's also then a connection, even only even back to the original carpet, because there were people who tied the knots on the carpet originally. So you've got all of these connections. I live in Bridport, which is famous for knots. All right. So we're famous for our knots and rope work and things like that in Bridport. So you've got knots in a carpet, you've got knots from Bridport. Just down the road, we have a place called Axminster. It's 12 miles away, which is famous for its carpets. And I'm going to be going into the museum there as well and talking to them. I'm going to be going to the museum in Dorchester and doing some workshops with them, hopefully. Because on the wall, they've got mosaics with big white spaces around them where there are missing pieces. And I see the parallels between that and between this carpet piece. And then you've got this idea of a dragon carpet. It is called a dragon carpet because it has a dragon design in it. Unfortunately, the dragon has been burnt away, but they have a black and white photo that relates back to the original carpet. So we can see the dragon within the design. But the dragon itself was the origin of dragons comes from Chinese mythology, and probably Chinese dragons were an invention based around fossils that had been found of dinosaurs. And these huge dinosaur bones were probably seen as dragon bones. And so they were connected to dragon. And here we are on the Jurassic coast, where we've got our own dragons or dinosaurs in the fossil record here. And Jawbone itself has the skull of a dragon, or a water dragon, an ichthyosaurus. So here we are. There's so many connections and a lot of possibilities for people to generate poetry or things. So yeah, so that's something I'm going to be working on over the next 9 months,
yeah,
both for
sounds like it.
Jawbone and myself. So
Brilliant.
um,
Brilliant. Now, obviously, the wrap up part two, Peter, then. First
yes.
of all, then, where can people track you down if they wish to speak to you further about anything you discussed today?
Well, you can find me on social media. You can find me personally on Instagram and also on Facebook at MediaChap, MEDIACHAP. And you can also find the Jawbone Collective. You can find me through the Jawbone Collective, which is at Jawbone Collective. And same for every other media platform. I think we're on YouTube, although not heavily populated on YouTube yet. We are currently taking on volunteers to help us with all of this social media stuff, and yeah, because this year we've gone nuts. Everybody wants a piece of the Jawbone, and yeah, so we're hoping it's going to be a very productive year for us this year.
That sounds like it indeed. Now, where can people ask us to get hold of the books and that published on Jawbone?
Again, the books they can get through our website. They can find links to get to our shop online, or you can go to our Instagram at Jawbone Collective, and on our link tree you can get links through to our books on there. And yeah, you'll be able to buy Charlotte's or Caroline's books there. And I should say that every book that we sell, we don't take the money from. That goes back into publishing poets. Anything that we do through workshops and selling books, anything like that, all goes back into finding new poets and bringing new poets out. And that's really what we're about.
Brilliant.
Finding new voices and giving them confidence and helping them build networks. So
Great stuff indeed, that mate. I'll respect you in that one. So there's a lot of work there. So it's been a pleasure today, this Peter. So everyone's wondering, we're now going to take a short break, and when we come back, Peter's going to read out a couple of pieces for us. So thank you, Peter. We should be back, everybody, in 2 shakes of the dice.